It's not as entertaining seeing five singers in sweaters as it is.
He was the voice of American rock, the man behind Fallin, Refugee, and American Girl. But what if we told you Tom Petty's greatest inspirations didn't come from the albums you'd expect? Behind the leather jackets, jangling guitars, and stadium tours was a musician with a taste that shocked even his fans. What records did Tom Petty treasure most? And why were they nothing like the music he made? To understand Tom Petty's favorite albums, you first have to understand the man himself. Born in Gainesville, Florida in 1950, Petty grew up far from the musical epicenters of New York or Los Angeles. His early life was marked by two things: a difficult relationship with his father and an obsession with rock and roll. That obsession began in 1964 when he saw the Beatles on The Ed Sullivan Show. Like millions of other kids, it changed his life. Within weeks, Petty had picked up a guitar and started local garage bands. But unlike many teenage dreamers, he had the drive and talent to push further. By the mid-1970s, Petty had formed Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, a band that would define American rock for decades. Their self-titled debut album, released in 1976, featured Breakdown and American Girl, songs that carried the DNA of Petty's influences: jangly guitars reminiscent of the Byrds, storytelling in the style of Dylan, and raw attitude straight from early rock pioneers. Petty was no copycat, though. He had a gift for blending influences into something original, something that spoke to both rock purists and mainstream audiences. As his career soared through the 1980s with hits like Refugee and later Fallin from his solo work, Petty remained a student of music. He constantly returned to the albums that first inspired him. Not just the popular ones everyone knew, but also obscure gems that shaped the way he wrote and played. In interviews, Petty often said that music wasn't just entertainment, it was a lifeline. "The records I loved as a kid," he once remarked, "those songs gave me something to hold on to." That connection explains why his favorite albums are so revealing. They weren't just background noise, they were the foundation for everything he created. When Tom Petty spoke about his favorite albums, it was no surprise that the Beatles were at the top of the list. For Petty, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band wasn't just a groundbreaking record. It was a revelation. He once explained how the album expanded what a rock band could do, blending studio experimentation with unforgettable melodies. For a young Petty, it proved that rock and roll could be both popular and profoundly artistic. Another essential was Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde, released in 1966. Petty admired Dylan's ability to turn lyrics into poetry, a skill he later channeled into his own writing. Songs like Refugee and even The Losers carried that same raw honesty and storytelling fire. Petty went on to perform alongside Dylan in the 1980s with the Traveling Wilburys, but his respect for Dylan began long before that collaboration. "Nobody ever wrote like Dylan," Petty said, "and nobody ever will." He also frequently mentioned Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds, an album that inspired his signature guitar sound. Roger McGuinn's 12-string Rickenbacker guitar gave Petty the jangly texture that would define hits like American Girl. Petty called the Byrds the soundtrack of my youth, and their influence never left him. These albums were the foundation, but Petty's list didn't stop with the obvious classics. His tastes reached into corners of rock, blues, and folk that revealed just how eclectic his inspirations really were. Beyond the big names, Tom Petty had a deep admiration for artists who never reached the same level of stardom. One of his most surprising favorites was J.J. Cale's Naturally, released in 1972. Cale's laid-back, groove-heavy style struck a chord with Petty. While Petty's own music was more energetic, he admired how Cale could create so much mood with so little. J.J. Cale had this coolness that no one else had, Petty once said. It was effortless. That understated approach influenced the quieter, more reflective side of Petty's songwriting. Another unexpected choice was James Brown's Live at the Apollo from 1963, an explosive soul record that Petty loved for its raw energy and precision. Even though Petty wasn't a soul singer, he deeply respected Brown's command of the stage and the tightness of his band. You can hear echoes of that influence in Petty's relentless commitment to live performance. His shows were about energy, connection, and giving the audience everything you had night after night. Petty also praised Van Morrison's Astral Weeks, a record that baffled critics when it first came out, but became legendary for its dreamlike mix of folk, jazz, and soul. Petty admired the album's emotional depth, calling it a world you could just disappear into. That kind of immersive storytelling shaped the way he approached more introspective albums later in his career. By mixing the obvious classics with these more unusual picks, Petty revealed the full range of his musical DNA, a blend of mainstream brilliance and left-field discoveries. What makes Tom Petty's list of favorite albums so fascinating is how clearly they map onto his own career. The Beatles and Dylan showed him how to merge art and accessibility, leading him to write songs that were both radio-friendly and lyrically profound. The Byrds gave him the jangly guitar sound that became his trademark. J.J. Cale and Van Morrison reminded him of the beauty in restraint, subtlety, and atmosphere. And James Brown taught him that performance is as much about spirit as it is about sound. When you listen to Petty's catalog, from Damn the Torpedoes to Wildflowers, you can hear echoes of all these records. His songs were never imitations, but rather evolutions of the music he loved most. Petty's ability to draw from such diverse influences while still creating a sound unmistakably his own is why his music continues to resonate across generations. Tom Petty's list of favorite albums wasn't just about admiration, it was a window into the way he thought about music and life. He celebrated artists who dared to innovate, who spoke the truth, and who performed with heart. Petty himself embodied those same qualities, which is why his fans connected with him so deeply. Looking back, it's easy to see how those 6 albums helped shape one of the greatest American songwriters of all time. They gave him a foundation, but also a challenge, to write music that mattered, that lasted, and that meant something to the people who listened. And in that sense, Tom Petty succeeded beyond measure. His favorites remind us that even legends stand on the shoulders of those who came before. Just as the Beatles, Dylan, and Van Morrison inspired Petty, his music now inspires countless others to pick up a guitar and chase their own truth. His legacy is proof that influences are not about imitation, but transformation, turning inspiration into something wholly original. For Petty, music was never only about fame or sales, it was about connection between artist and audience, between one generation and the next. That's why his choices still matter today. They show us the roots of his sound, but also the values that kept him grounded. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all, that timeless music is born from honesty, courage, and love for the craft. Thanks for watching. Click here to check another video and make sure to subscribe to our channel.